What if I told you that a $20 billion railway project in India could reshape the entire balance of power in Asia? This single high-speed rail line might determine whether Japan or China dominates infrastructure development across the continent for decades to come. To understand what's happening right now between Mumbai and Ahmedabad, we need to go back to October 1964. Japan is hosting the Olympics for the first time, and the nation unveils something the world has never seen before: the Shinkansen, the bullet train. Connecting Tokyo to Osaka at speeds exceeding 200 kilometers per hour, this gleaming white train becomes Japan's symbol of post-war rebirth. But more than that, it establishes Japan as the undisputed master of high-speed rail technology, a crown they've worn for 60 years. Fast forward to the present day, and Japan is building its most ambitious international rail project ever attempted. The Mumbai-Ahmedabad high-speed rail corridor stretches 508 kilometers across western India, connecting the nation's financial capital to its textile hub with 12 stations along the way. The numbers are staggering. Trains designed to reach 320 kilometers per hour will slash a grueling 7-hour journey down to under 2 hours. But here's the truly remarkable part: Japan is essentially giving this away, funding the entire project through a loan you won't believe. The Japan International Cooperation Agency, JITSA, offered India $20 billion at just 0.1% annual interest, payable over 50 years. To put that in perspective, that's practically free money. Japan is betting its entire reputation on making this work. The engineering challenges facing this project are absolutely monumental, with 400 kilometers of the route running on elevated viaducts. These concrete ribbons hover above the ground to avoid disrupting the densely packed landscape below, but that's just the beginning of the complexity involved here. As the line approaches Mumbai, engineers face an entirely different beast: 21 kilometers of underground tunnel. This tunnel must be carved through one of the world's most congested urban environments, and then comes the most audacious part: 7 kilometers of that tunnel runs directly under the sea. At Thane Creek, massive tunnel boring machines burrow beneath the seabed, creating an underwater passage for trains traveling at highway speeds. This isn't just engineering, it's an extraordinary demonstration of Japanese precision and ambition. But why is Japan going to such extreme lengths for India? To answer that question, we need to travel to Indonesia in the year 2015, where Japan suffered one of the most humiliating defeats in its modern industrial history. Japan had been negotiating for years to build Indonesia's first high-speed railway between Jakarta and Bandung. The deal seemed virtually certain until China swept in at the last moment with an offer Indonesia couldn't refuse. China promised faster completion, lower costs, and most temptingly, no requirement for government guarantees, while Japan watched helplessly as Indonesia chose China, and the defeat stung deeply. This Indonesian railway became the flagship of China's Belt and Road Initiative in Southeast Asia, proving it could export entire infrastructure systems. The message was clear: China was the new infrastructure superpower, and Japan was yesterday's news. China didn't stop with Indonesia either. In Laos, one of Asia's poorest nations, Beijing built a 422-kilometer railway. The project cost $6 billion, and Laos eagerly signed on, dreaming of economic transformation. Across Southeast Asia, Chinese railways and infrastructure projects multiplied like mushrooms after rain. Thailand, Malaysia, and Cambodia all signed deals or memorandums of understanding. China's Belt and Road seemed unstoppable, a juggernaut of concrete and steel remaking the region's geography. But then something remarkable happened, and the narrative began to shift in unexpected ways. Those gleaming Chinese projects started revealing cracks in their foundations. In Indonesia, the Jakarta Bandung Railway that defeated Japan became known by a nickname that tells you everything: whoosh. What was promised as a game-changing connector turned into what critics called a financial flop. Ridership remained stubbornly low, operating costs soared beyond projections, and the railway failed to generate anywhere near the economic activity that had been promised. In Laos, the situation grew even more dire and troubling. That $6 billion railway had pushed the tiny nation into a devastating debt crisis. Laos owed China more than it could possibly repay, and Beijing began taking control of national assets as collateral, including power grids. The pattern became impossible to ignore across multiple countries as Chinese projects routinely exploded past their initial budgets. Promised job creation materialized as Chinese workers imported to do the labor, and quality concerns emerged as structures aged prematurely, revealing cost-cutting measures throughout. Meanwhile, back in India, Japan's meticulous approach was proceeding exactly as planned, though admittedly slower than China would have built. Every detail received exhaustive attention, every safety standard met or exceeded. This wasn't just about building a railway anymore, it had become about something far bigger. India represented Japan's comeback story, its chance to prove that quality engineering and sustainable financing beat cheap promises every single time. The Mumbai-Ahmedabad corridor became the flagship counter-narrative to China's Belt and Road, a symbol of democratic nations cooperating on equal terms. Beyond economics and engineering, this project cemented a deeper strategic alliance between Tokyo and New Delhi. Both nations viewed China's growing influence with serious concern, and this railway became a tangible expression of their partnership, a steel and concrete bulwark against Beijing's ambitions. But here's where the story gets truly fascinating. Japan didn't just bring its legendary infrastructure to India, it brought something even more valuable. It brought trust, patience, and a willingness to share technology without strings attached. While China's Belt and Road demanded control and influence, Japan offered genuine partnership, and that distinction would prove absolutely critical. The turning point came when Japan made an extraordinary gesture. Before construction even finished, they shipped 5 complete E5 Shinkansen train sets to India, absolutely free of charge. These weren't obsolete models or hand-me-downs. These were the same bullet trains running passengers at 320 kilometers per hour across Japan every single day, now gifted to Indian engineers. The purpose was brilliant. Japan wanted Indian engineers to study these trains, to understand every component, every system, every safety protocol. These E5 trains became mobile universities, rolling laboratories where Indian technicians could learn the intricate details of Shinkansen technology firsthand, preparing them for the moment when the Mumbai-Ahmedabad corridor would roar to life with passengers. And then Japan dropped the biggest bombshell of all. In negotiations that stunned the railway world, they agreed to something unprecedented. When the Mumbai-Ahmedabad line finally opens, it won't run yesterday's technology. It will debut Japan's newest, most advanced bullet train, the E10 Shinkansen. This E10 will be launched simultaneously in India and Japan at exactly the same time, symbolizing unparalleled technological equality. Think about what that means for a moment. Japan's newest flagship train, the pinnacle of decades of continuous innovation. Making its world debut not just in Tokyo or Osaka, but also in Mumbai and Ahmedabad, no other country had ever received such an honor. This wasn't technology transfer, this was technology equality, a statement that India stood shoulder to shoulder with Japan. The E10 represents the absolute cutting edge, more energy efficient than any previous Shinkansen, with advanced aerodynamics that slice through air resistance. Regenerative braking systems feed electricity back into the grid, and passenger comfort features redefine luxury rail travel. India would get it first, on the same day as Japan itself, a powerful symbol of mutual respect. This decision sent shockwaves through Asia. China had spent billions showcasing its high-speed rail across Southeast Asia, yet here was Japan. Entrusting its most advanced technology to India without hesitation, the message was unmistakable: quality partnerships matter more than quick deals. Genuine collaboration beats opportunistic expansion every single time, especially when building infrastructure that must last generations. Meanwhile, the stark contrast with China's projects became impossible to ignore. The Jakarta Bandung line that humiliated Japan in 2015? It finally opened in 2023, years behind schedule and billions over budget. Indonesians dubbed it the whoosh, but the nickname couldn't hide the disappointment. Ridership fell far short of projections, and questions about debt repayment haunted officials. In Laos, the situation turned even grimmer. China's high-speed railway had transformed the small nation into a debt trap. Laos now owed China billions it could never repay, with whispers that Beijing might claim land, resources, or strategic control as collateral. What looked like generous development had become economic colonialism, and other nations watched nervously, reconsidering their own deals. Country after country began reassessing Chinese infrastructure promises. Thailand delayed its high-speed rail projects, Malaysia renegotiated terms, Vietnam looked elsewhere for partners. The pattern became clear. China's initial bids looked attractive, but the long-term costs, financial, political, and strategic, proved devastating. The Belt and Road shine had worn off, revealing the harsh reality underneath the glossy presentations and ribbon-cutting ceremonies. And that's precisely why India mattered so much to Japan. This wasn't just about one railway line connecting two cities. This was Japan's definitive answer to China's Belt and Road, a demonstration that sustainable infrastructure required patience, genuine expertise, and partnerships built on equality rather than dependency. The Mumbai-Ahmedabad corridor became proof that a better model existed, one that fostered genuine collaboration. Japan's approach cost more upfront and took longer to implement, absolutely. But unlike China's projects, this railway wouldn't saddle India with unpayable debt or compromise its sovereignty. The 0.1% interest rate over 50 years meant India would barely feel the financial burden, while gaining world-class infrastructure and invaluable technological knowledge for decades to come. Construction crews continued their relentless work. The 400-kilometer elevated viaduct stretched further each month, concrete pillars marching across the landscape. In Mumbai, tunnel boring machines ground through rock beneath the city, carving out the 21-kilometer underground section. The 7-kilometer underwater passage beneath Thane Creek represented engineering at its most audacious. Challenges emerged constantly: land acquisition disputes, environmental concerns, pandemic delays, budget pressures. Every massive infrastructure project faces setbacks. But unlike the chaos plaguing Chinese projects across Asia, these problems were addressed transparently, with Japanese and Indian engineers working together to find solutions rather than pointing fingers or hiding failures behind propaganda. By 2024, the project had transformed from blueprint to reality. Test tracks opened, and the first E5 trains arrived at Indian depots. Technicians swarmed over them, learning every detail. Engineers ran simulations, tested systems, and prepared operations manuals. The vision that seemed impossible a decade earlier was becoming tangible, touchable, and real. And when the Mumbai-Ahmedabad corridor finally opens, carrying passengers between these two vital cities in under 2 hours instead of 7, it will represent something far bigger than fast trains. It will mark the moment India joined the ranks of high-speed rail nations, yes, but more importantly, it will demonstrate that patient, quality-focused partnerships can defeat cheap, quick, exploitative deals. 60 years after that first Shinkansen departed Tokyo Station, changing transportation forever, Japan's bullet train technology crosses the ocean to find a new home. The legacy that began in 1964 continues in 21st century India, adapted but unmistakable. The Shinkansen spirit, safety, precision, reliability, innovation, now pulses through a project that connects not just cities, but nations, philosophies, and visions of what infrastructure should truly mean. In the end, this $20 billion railway tells a story bigger than steel and concrete. It's a story about choosing partnership over dominance, quality over speed, and sustainable development over predatory loans. When those E10 Shinkansen trains finally race across western India, they'll carry more than passengers. They'll carry proof that another path exists, and sometimes the best answer to aggression is simply building